Hello everyone and welcome back to our channel, The Xanadu Chronicles. My name is Frank and today I'm going to talk to you about how to create a gallery wall, or salon wall as they call it in Europa. I have in my home several gallery walls, and I think most people have at least one. And currently in my library, and behind me is one of my gallery walls. And so I'm going to use this as my example because I believe it has a lot of the components that will exemplify what I think it takes to create a successful grouping or composition. But before we go into that, I want to talk to you about, just briefly, about visual balance. Because for me, whenever I do any kind of tutorial for you or do any kind of design work for myself or our home, I want you to understand that for me, visual balance is a key component of my design. It's always the goal to create visual balance, whether it be in a gallery wall or on a vignette, or in a vignette on a coffee table, or even the space planning of a room. Visual balance is key for me, and I consider it to be a foundation of good design. And so you'll be hearing me talk about that a lot, and I apologize for it now, but it is that important, so I kind of want to stress it. And basically visual balance is the placement of weight, visual weight in a composition. And so if you look behind me, if you can imagine all of the big pieces on one side and all the small pieces on the other side, obviously the visual balance will be off, and that's what it is about, making sure that it's not off, because again, for me, when I see that, it throws things off in my head. And if you're in a room where the decor is not balanced, the furniture is not balanced, there's a certain uneasiness that comes along with it that I feel, and I know others do as well. So we want to avoid that, because last thing you want is anyone throwing up in your house because your furniture is not balanced. Hopefully it doesn't get to that extreme, but I'm warning you now, just in case. So, like I said, I've got several gallery walls in my home, and I will show you some pictures of those, but let's talk about this one. Now, before we go on, there are 4 categories I think most people categorize their artwork in. So when you're creating a gallery wall, as you're looking at your artwork, you might want to think about these categories so you can determine maybe which is the best for your particular composition. The first one is theme. So behind me, it's all about landscapes. In my bedroom, it's about seascapes. And then I have another composition, gallery wall, that has kind of like historic buildings or landmarks. But for the most part, all of my compositions are thematic in that sense. Secondly, we've got the medium. So you can have oil paintings, maybe you like collecting watercolors, or photographs. Those are different mediums, and so if you've got a lot of a particular medium, then maybe you want to put your wall together using that as your binding component. The third category is eclectic, or what I call eclectic, and that includes what one might deem non-traditional art. So in one of my compositions I've got platters, in others I've got taxidermy. Some people like to hang quilts, or even signs. So when you mix that in with what you consider traditional art, that's what I deem as eclectic. And then finally, along that line, maybe a larger category than eclectic would be a combination, which is any or all of the prior 3 put together. So say you like to collect oil paintings of dogs, or photos of ships. Whatever it may be, that's a combination because it's thematic and it's a medium, right? So that is the largest category, and basically you can throw the kitchen sink in that one, okay? So that can have everything. So those are the 4 main categories. So again, as you're laying out your art and looking at how you want to create these gallery walls, you can look at it and then kind of maybe put them in a category, okay? So now I think it's time to talk about how to actually create a gallery wall successfully. And these are the steps that I take when I'm doing that and what I've done for all of my spaces. So let me stop the camera for a moment because I want to sit down and rejigger the focus on the gallery wall so that you can hear me talking about it, and I'll point things out to you as I'm doing it, okay? So, hold on. Hello everyone, I'm back behind the camera here and ready to show you guys how to create that gallery wall of your dreams. Now before we get started, I do want to point out a factor that you do need to take into consideration prior to you composing your layout, and that is whether or not you have a piece of furniture like my Chesterfield sofa underneath your composition. Because if you do have a piece of furniture underneath, your composition is going to relate directly to it, meaning you need to make sure that you center your composition on that piece of furniture. So that first piece you hang in the middle there needs to be centered on whatever that piece of furniture is underneath, because they relate to one another. Imagine if this was one big painting and you put it there and you hung it to the left. The relationship would look off because it is off, and therefore be visually unbalanced, and you do not want to create that. It just does not look right. So bear that in mind. If you do not have a piece of furniture underneath, or will not have a piece of furniture underneath, then you have all the freedom in the world. But I tend to, no matter what the wall space may be, I always tend to center it on the wall because I just find that more aesthetically pleasing. Now that you have that, let's talk about the steps. Step number 1, collect your art, obviously, duh. So collect your pieces, and as you can see, based on my categorization from earlier, I've got a combo or combination composition because I've got a strong theme, which is my landscapes, and then I also have some non-traditional pieces like my vintage tortoise shells, and again, all of our taxidermy is vintage or antique. Sorry about that, I just had a brain fart. And then going on from there, we have a piece of art that's unframed. It's actually painted directly on a plaque of wood. And down here I've got a beautiful little Iranian plate. It's silver metal, and it's embossed with a floral motif. And it's quite beautiful, so I'll put up a close-up of that so you can see it. Now once you have your art pieces that you want to put up or put into your layout, next is working on the layout with visual balance in mind. Now there are 2 ways you can do that. The way I did it was I got the dimensions of the wall space that I wanted to hang my art in, and then I got some painter's tape and marked that out on the floor and actually laid out the actual pieces on the floor within that boundary. Okay? And you know, I don't have a ton of pieces here, so that was relatively easy to do. If you've got more than this or a bigger wall space, you probably don't want to do that because of just pure safety. Look at the glass. You don't want to be stepping in on that and messing up your artwork. So the second method is the paper template method. And you can even use lightweight cardboard for this or newspaper, but basically you put your piece of art on the paper, you trace it out, you cut it out, and there you go. You got a template, and then you can start playing with the actual placement on the wall with these paper templates. Now, as you're doing this, there are some factors you do need to bear in mind so that you can create that balance in the artwork. First one is the size of the piece. Obviously, a bigger piece is going to have more visual weight than a smaller piece, right? So you've got to bear that in mind. Secondly is the frame style. If you look at the frame up here, and I'm going to show you a close-up of this as well, it is carved out and actually is a 3-dimensional piece. It juts out. So it has way more visual weight than, per se, this piece, which is just a skinny silver gilded frame, right? So there's more visual weight there. You've got to keep that in mind. Thirdly, color. So typically, the darker the colors in the painting or picture or whatever it may be, the heavier the weight is going to come across. And so if you have something that's like here, that's really a dark palette versus up here, which is a little bit more softer and subdued, there's more visual weight down here, right? And typically, more pieces with more color will have more visual weight than pieces that are more monochromatic. So you got to keep that in mind. And then finally, the medium. So if you look at an oil painting, typically you can see brush strokes in it, right? Or you can see, if they're painting with a palette knife, a lot of thickness and a lot of texture. That adds to visual weight versus, per se, something smoother like a photograph. So you have to keep that into consideration as you're working through this puzzle, which is the layout. Now, a trick that I like to employ is that I will typically put my largest piece in the center, and then I will work out with the next largest pieces in the layout where they're going to go, and then the smallest pieces, because it's easier to finagle and adjust those smaller pieces in those awkward spaces that are left over after the big pieces are put into place. Imagine if you had put this, or I had put this large piece in the corner here. Trying to figure out how to work everything else in the remaining space would just be a horrid mess. And it can be done, but it's way more time consuming and more difficult. So it's good to start with your big pieces first and then work outward from there. Another trick that I like to employ when I'm creating a gallery wall is that if you look at the spacing between the pieces, top and bottom, side to side, I try to keep it within 1 to 2 inches because if you make them larger than that, it looks sloppier, for one. It looks unplanned, and like you just threw it up there anywhere randomly, and you're wasting valuable wall space. So keep it tight, because ultimately, again, the whole composition is going to read as one. So the closer and the tighter, the better it's going to look. Now, once your layout is done, this is a tip you need to write down, stamp it on your hand. Do what you need to do to remember this, because this will save you massive amounts of hair loss. And that is, if you're laying it on the floor, take a frickin' picture. Take a picture, 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 take a picture. Because I guarantee you, no matter how good your memory is, you are going to forget the spacing relationship between the pieces. Now, even though you're going to hang them between 1 and 2 inches apart, like the relationship of this tortoiseshell to this painting to this art piece here, this rises up about 3 inches above the top of this. This juts in just about an inch from the edge there, and so you got to have a picture to refer to. Otherwise, you're going to forget, and you're going to be going up and down, trying to figure out what that relationship was again, and you do not want to waste your time doing that. Guarantee you. Now, if you're doing the paper templates, something you want to do as you're creating them is number the template and then put a post-it on the artwork and number that as well, because again, I don't care how good your memory is, as you're shuffling and shifting things on the wall, especially if you've got a lot of pieces that are similarly sized, you are going to forget what's what. And the last thing you want to do is having to try to compare which art piece is which, corresponds to which template. So write the number down on it, and again, you will stave off any baldness that you might otherwise have from losing your hair because you had to do it 2,000 times and figure out which template goes to which piece of art. So number your paper templates, take a picture of your placement if it's on the floor. Now, another thing you're going to want to do is when you start your hanging of the composition, start with your centerpiece first and make sure that it is at eye level. Okay, so as I'm standing in front of it, I'm looking directly at the center of this art piece, because when people look at art and a composition, they start at the center and then they work their way out. That's how people look at art typically, right? You never go look at the corner of a piece of art first. You always look at the center and then you work your way out. So that's why you want to create this composition with that first piece at eye level, centered above your piece of furniture, okay? And then as you are putting your other pieces, even when you're working on the layout, like I said, work your way outward, work with your biggest pieces first, and then put your smaller pieces in between, because once you transfer it to the wall, from floor to wall, let's say, you're going to not get it perfect, for sure. So hang your pieces up, and when you do the small pieces in between the larger, you have more wiggle room. So say you hung this piece just a little lower than you had intended to, or than you had in your picture. Oh, what am I going to do? Well, you can move this piece up a little bit, move this piece over a little bit, so you have that wiggle room, and you might have to do some balancing on the spot, but that's way easier in the long run, okay? Now, even though a salon wall takes a little time to create, it takes a little precision to work through the layout, it really is meant to feel like you built it up over time. So a good final composition looks like you bought that piece, and then you bought these two pieces, and you put them up, and you put that piece in there. But with the idea that as you were adding to your collection, you were creating balance. So if you were to add more pieces to this, say you found some other artwork, then you have some spots to work with, and then you have to keep in mind, how are you going to balance things out, right? So you can still build on a gallery wall continuously, but always think about ultimately the final visual balance of the full composition, okay? And really, that's about it. So I hope you got some good pointers. I hope you are going to be excited about creating that next gallery wall and not be scared of doing so. And I hope you come back and watch more of my videos. Thanks, guys, and have a great week. See you next week. Bye. If you haven't seen our previous videos, click on the links and watch away. Please share, like, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel. We'll do our best to keep you entertained and coming back for more. Bye for now.